I was never supposed to be out here, at least not according to everyone who knew me. Before the Appalachian Trail, my longest hike was a hungover hour in the woods behind my college dorm. But after graduation, the world felt small. My friends scattered, my girlfriend left me, and my parents' house was just another place that I didn't belong. I told people I wanted an adventure, but the truth was, I just wanted to disappear for a while, walk until my head emptied out, or until I figured what came next. The trail was supposed to strip things down to basics: walk, eat, sleep, and repeat. But after 6 weeks and almost 500 miles, my mind was still crowded. I thought I'd come out here to get over her, to prove something to myself, but she still haunted my dreams and my playlists. Every time my phone caught a signal and her name didn't pop up, it stung me. And most nights I lay awake in my bag, listening to the wind and wishing I could just forget everything. College, her, and the future pressing in like a fog. But still, each morning I woke up, I packed my bag, and I kept moving north, hoping that the trail would finally quiet my mind. The landscape shifted as I walked, Massachusetts rolling out before me in endless shades of green. Every step felt like a negotiation with my own body. My feet were a map of blisters, raw patches on my heels, toes rubbed nearly numb, old wounds splitting open as soon as new ones formed. Each morning I'd wince as I laced up my stiff, sweat-stained boots, feeling the sting before I'd even taken a step. My legs burned on the climbs, quads and calves screaming by the end of every long ascent, especially when the trail pitched upward toward Greylock, or snaked endlessly over slick, mossy rocks. I envied the way locals bounded along for a few hours, smiling and fresh, while I limped through another day, skin chafed and shoulders aching from the constant drag of my overloaded pack. I've been on the AT for almost 6 weeks, legs lean and mind tuned to the rhythm of dirt. Northern Massachusetts sprawled ahead, a green corridor with the Vermont border just a day's hike away. It was late June, the sunlight clean and gold, and the air sharp with last spring's chill, the only sound my boots crunching on needles. But no amount of conditioning could prepare me for the relentless grind. Some days exhaustion pressed so hard against my skull that the world blurred at the edges. I'd catch myself zoning out, missing blazes, stumbling over roots that seemed to reach for my ankles. Hunger gnawed at me too. No matter how much I ate, I always felt hollow. My stomach was like a bottomless pit, my body eating itself just to keep moving forward. That stretch, north of Dalton and climbing toward Mount Greylock, was straight ahead. Pines on both sides, trunks skinny and spaced like cathedral columns. And the lack of underbrush meant that you could see deep, hundreds of feet, right through the forest. I'd been alone all morning. I haven't seen a soul since the last shelter. The trail itself was a pale ribbon, pressed flat by decades of boots, winding through the towering pines. And every so often, sunlight filtered down in golden shafts, illuminating clouds of drifting pollen and the lazy looping flight of moths. Far above me, crows argued in the treetops, their voices echoing off of trunks that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The air was thick with the sweet rot of fallen needles, and sometimes when the breeze shifted I caught the faint tang of creosote from distant railroad ties, reminders that civilization was never as far away as the woods made you believe. About 100 yards up, I spotted him, a guy standing dead center on the trail. And what caught my eye first was his pack. It was this massive, battered external frame, the kind you only see in faded photos from the 70s. He wore impossibly short gym shorts, pale blue with a yellow trim, and his legs were shockingly white against the shadows. His hair was a thick, tangled mop, He looked like he'd stepped right out of a grainy Polaroid. He was just standing there, not moving, not even pretending to adjust his gear. And then as I got closer, he turned slowly, almost as if he hadn't heard me coming, and stared right at me. His eyes were flat and pale. He didn't smile, and in one smooth motion, he stepped off the trail to the left and vanished into the trees. Now, maybe it was the fatigue, but everything felt sharper in those moments. The ache in my arches, the way my hip bones bruised under the straps, the sweat stinging in scrapes on my shins. When I reached that spot, maybe 2 minutes later, I looked left, expecting to see him picking his way through the pine needles, maybe taking a leak or a break. But the forest was empty. The trees were thin, the ground open. It was visibly perfect. There was no crunch of movement, no glimpse of the blue shorts, nothing, just sun-dappled emptiness. I even called out a lame, "Hey," but my voice sounded stupid and small. A sudden chill prickled along my arms. The woods seemed to hold their breath, the birds falling silent all at once, as if some unseen presence was passing through. I tried to laugh nervously, but the sound died in my throat. And above, a single pine cone tumbled from a branch and landed at my feet, startling me into motion. I looked up and I scanned the forest again, my heart pounding. I was convinced I'd catch a glimpse of the blue between the trunks, but I didn't. The emptiness felt charged like static before a storm. Now, for a long moment, I just stood there, listening to my own breathing and the distant chatter of a blue jay. The silence pressed in heavier than before. He was gone. Now, on the Appalachian Trail, there are weird hikers everywhere. There's guys who like vintage gear. There's loners who don't make small talk. But something about him, the way he moved, how he looked right through me, set my teeth on edge. That night I camped at Wilbur Clearing, and an older section hiker named Dave shared the shelter. Over freeze-dried chili, I mentioned the strange guy. Dave's spoon froze in midair. "In the old shorts?" he asked, his voice dropping low. "With a big frame pack?" I nodded. "Oh hell, son, I think you saw the walker." Now every shadow seemed to stretch far. Every snap of a twig made my heart jump. I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me like damp wool. He told me the story. A hiker from the late 70s who disappeared somewhere between Cheshire and the Vermont line. Supposedly, he still walked the trail, always alone and always silent. "You know, people do see him," Dave whispered. "When the weather's really good, or if you're alone." He winked, but I wasn't sure if he was being sarcastic or not. That night, sleep never fully returned. Each time I drifted off, I dreamed I was walking the same stretch of trail over and over, always with someone just behind me, with their footsteps perfectly in sync with mine. About 3 a.m, I woke to the sensation of cold air brushing my face from inside of the tent, which was impossible when the zipper was closed tight. The next morning, climbing up Greylock's shoulder, I found a soggy, sun-bleached Polaroid jammed under a root. It was a blurry shot of a young man in blue shorts. The edges were curled like claws. I turned the photo over in my hands, squinting at the warped face, the washed-out colors, and for a moment, I thought I saw the shadow of another figure behind him, something tall and indistinct, lost in the faded background. I slid the Polaroid into my journal, but for the rest of the day, it felt heavy in my pack, as if it were pulling me backward, dragging me deeper into the wood's memory. Every snap of a twig made me spin around, half expecting to see that same blank stare fixed on me from the shadows. And after that, the forest changed for me. I'd always felt watched on the trail, But I think every through hiker does. It's that isolation and that loneliness sometimes. On silent stretches, I'd sometimes hear footsteps behind me on the pine needles, never catching up, just always out of sight. I finally stopped looking back behind me. Sometimes it's better not to know. By the time I reached the long trail split, I'd gotten used to the trail's ghosts, real or imagined, but every time a hiker passed by in the distance, I checked the color of their shorts, and every time the trees thinned out, I scanned for a battered old frame pack just to be sure. Trail life has its own world, a string of fleeting friendships and shared oddities. Most hikers went by trail names: Sunshine, Scooter, Blaze, nicknames earned over campfire confessions or just dumb luck. At the Shaker campsite, I'd met a wiry guy called Hobbit, who carried a spoon he claimed was carved by a ghost at Blood Mountain. We all laughed. There was a guy named Cricket, who had a razor wit, and he snorted. "You sure that's just not a stick you whittled after too much trail mix?" Hobbit grinned, waving the spoon. "Jealousy's a disease, man." And then there was this guy named Atlas, who was always fishing for snacks. Coach was the oldest of us and a self-appointed trail philosopher. He just shook his head. "You kids and your ghosts. Back in my day, we just blamed everything on raccoons and bad water. Giardia's a real bitch, you know." Even when Cricket found her boots swapped for ancient rotting sneakers at Upper Goose Pond Shelter, she held them up and glared. "Nice try, guys. If I get trench foot, I'm haunting all of you." Hobbit leaned back. "As long as you don't hum like that Walker dude, we'll manage." Even in the creepiest moments, the banter helped. That night at Stratton Pond, after Coach claimed he'd seen the Walker twice, once in Virginia, once up here, Atlas muttered, "If that humming starts again, I'm sleeping in the privy." Cricket elbowed me. "You're the one who looks most likely to bolt. If you vanish, at least leave us your snacks." And I tried to joke back. "Tell my mom I died heroically wrestling a bear or something." And then Coach just raised an eyebrow. "If I see you wrestling anything out here, I'm betting on the wildlife." That night, the forest pressed in close around our little newly formed group. Darkness absolute beyond the flickering fire. Every so often, the wind would rise and make the pines groan overhead, their long shadows twisting across our faces. And somewhere far off, an owl called, its cry warbling and strange, and we all went quiet, listening to the hush that followed. The woods felt ancient out here, as if the trail passed through a place older than memory, where stories were waiting to slip loose from the trees. Even though we did have a nice tight group, the oddities started stacking up after I saw the Walker. My journal vanished from my pack, reappearing 3 days later in the pocket that I never used. The pages were damp and covered in muddy fingerprints. When I asked Coach about it, he didn't say anything. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was something else. At a trail magic table near Cheshire, Atlas handed me a can of Coke and whispered, "If you do see the guy again in the shorts and we're not with you, don't follow him off the path." I started noticing things that shouldn't have been there. A single child's sock on a boulder, a faded patch from a Boy Scout troop nailed to a tree miles from any town, and a pile of smooth river stones stacked in a perfect cairn in the middle of a dried creek bed. At Seth Warner's shelter, I woke to find my boots neatly side by side, cleaned of weeks of grime, with a tiny brittle wildflower tucked into each. The longer I hiked, the more the line blurred between what was real and what belonged to the trail's long memory. But no matter how strange things got, the only option was to keep moving. The camaraderie was real, but I always felt a beat behind. When the others joked or passed around a joint, I'd laugh and nod, but there was a distance, like I was only half present. I kept thinking about what I'd left behind. My old friends starting new jobs, posting pictures of apartment and happy hours, while I wandered through the woods talking to ghosts. The farther I walked, the more I wondered if I was wearing myself down to nothing, not just physically, but mentally as well. The thoughts felt thin, stretched out by miles and the monotony, and sometimes I worried if I was becoming as much of a ghost as anything I'd seen out here. The pain in my body became kind of an anchor, proof that I was still real, still moving, even as the memories and the strangeness of the woods tried to pull me under. By the end of each day, I was never sure what hurt more, the blisters or the memories, but I kept walking, because on the trail, moving forward was the only thing that made sense. Now after Vermont, the trail kept going, but something in me changed. I lost interest. I did make it all the way to Katahdin. I had to finish it, and I did. But even months later, back in the world of hot showers and crowded bars, those woods stuck with me. My feet finally healed, and the ache in my legs faded. But some nights, I'd wake up convinced that I heard boots crunching pine needles outside my window, or catch a glimpse of pale blue in the corner of my eye as I crossed the city street. I will pull out that warped Polaroid. It's still stuck at the back of my journal. I stare at the faded face, half expecting it to blink. I tell myself it was just a weird guy, a trick of exhaustion and way too many ghost stories. But every so often, when the city feels small and the world's pressing in again, I catch myself looking north, wondering if the walker's still out there, keeping watch over the lonely stretches of trail. Just last week, I received an actual letter from Atlas, who finished the trail days before I did. This is what he said to me. "Hey there, ghost boy. I hope you finished the trail and made it back home in one piece. I'm heading out to Denver to hike the Colorado Trail next spring. Coach is coming with me, so if you want to join us, let me know. We're also trying to reach out to Cricket as well. We'd love to have you come along. Oh, and by the way, I was the one that polished your boots for you. Just some trail magic, I smiled as I read the letter. I guess the fog of my future is starting to clear.